Hello and welcome to this edition of Alabama Adventures. Once again tonight it is freezing cold here in the state of Alabama. We're in about the middle of winter. I've had to break out my long johns and my flannel shirt to try to keep warm. We're looking for snow after a while, and which I hope it don't. But I did talk to a friend of mine who does a lot of Bigfoot investigating up on Mount Cheehaw and around Cheehaw, the Cheehaw area. I talked to him just a little while ago, and he said that they had already received some snow up there this afternoon, and we're looking for some more tonight. And I told him, well, to keep it up that way, that I sure didn't need none down this way. What we need is some short pants weathers, some bikini weathers for the ladies around. Temperatures in the high 80s and 90s and up around 100 would suit me right now. But anyway, I'll let you see somebody that is a Bigfoot tracker or Bigfoot Hunter, whatever you want to call him. But he's already piled up in the bed this afternoon. It's cold. He's in front of the fire and decided that we should talk about something else besides hunting Bigfoot, because it's just too cold to go hunt a Bigfoot this afternoon. So what we're going to talk about tonight is lost Indian caves, which is a interesting subject to me. I enjoy things about Native American Indians, all Indians, especially Creek Indians, and Indians that are in Texas. I have ancestry to both of those particular groups. Anyway, what I want to talk to you to begin with about tonight is a lost Indian cave that a man told me about several years ago. And after he told me his story, there's some other things that I'm going to tell you about that tied it in together. Anyway, right here is a shot of the Tallapoosa River. You're looking north here from the Malone Bridge. Malone, Alabama used to be a pretty big little town. It's on County Road 15, located in the Randolph County. If you're ever up that way, you won't even know when you go through it. You'll know when you cross this bridge on County Road 15. He told me about this one afternoon. As a matter of fact, we were on the banks of the river. He and his family, and they invited me up, and we got to talking about things. And he got to talking about when he was a young boy. He was a older man at the time that he told me this. As a matter of fact, he was a World War I veteran, and that would kind of let you know about how old he was. And he said back around the turn of the century that he and some of his brothers and some of the other boys in the community that were interested and liked to do Indian hunting and that type of stuff found some caves along this river. They were on the east side of the Tallapoosa River. He said from where this shot is being taken right now, he said it was about 2.5 or 3 miles up the river. And this is a shot of a cliff that would look very similar to it. This is not the actual cliff of where he was telling that the lost Indian caves are, but this is a cliff that he said very much resembled that one. Matter of fact, he said there were 2 caves on the side of this cliff that overlooked the river. And he said the only access you had to get up there was in a dugout or a canoe, and you went up to the bank. And he said the Indians had actually carved toe holes into the rock. It was a very well protected place, but that's how they got up and down to their home, was here. I have also had some reports of Bigfoot in this immediate area, and I wonder if Bigfoot uses these caves, but he may not, because a few years ago, this man that told me this story, his son, I asked him about it several years after the old man died. Had he ever heard that story? And he said yes, and he related pretty much the same thing that his father had told me. He said that over time the caves were gone, that earthquakes and stuff in the area over, I'm going to say 80 to 100 years now, had caused the caves to cave in. But I've always wondered if he was telling me the truth, or if he just didn't want me to go up there after what all that his father told me that he found in the cave, because his son, like I said, told me the same identical story of what all they found in these caves. I am very interested in Native American culture and history and their religion and their beliefs and that type of stuff. Anyway, the old man told me, he said that him and his brothers or some friends, depending on who wanted to go at that particular time, would get in a boat and they would paddle upriver. Now, up this river, you will go on to Harris Dam and to Lake Wedowee. Of course, now he didn't have to go that far. He said it was about 2.5, maybe 3 miles up there. They saw the caves. They had heard from their parents that these were Indian caves at one time, and he said what they did, they actually climbed the cliff by putting their toe in the little toe holes and hanging on with their fingers in these little holes that the Indians had carved in the rock so you could climb up there. And he said once you got in the cave, he said it was just pretty much like they had just left it. He said he found clothing. He said the clothing was made out of what he thought was deer hide. He said he found a lot of tools, arrowheads. Said he found beads. He actually said that he found some arrows that were still intact because they had been in the dry in this cave over a period of years. The Indians were forced to move out of here, I believe, in 1834. So when he was a young boy, would have probably been around 1900, give or take a few years. So it had only been probably 75 years since the Indians had actually lived in these two caves up there. But he just told of all the type of stuff he found in there and said they got some of it and brought some of it back home and said some of it they left. He said at the entrance of both caves, you could tell where at one time they had fires. And he said that rocks were like in a small circle there, and said you could tell at one point in time they had actually had fires there. And I asked him what kind of clothing did he find, and he said that they found shoes, was what he called them. Now I guess they're called moccasins. But he said they found shoes, and said it was kind of resembled of a bedroom shoe. He said, but they were made out of leather, and holes were punched in them, and then they were laced together, the tops to the sides and then to the bottoms. But he said that he found one time what he thought was a pair of pants, but he guessed it was leggings. That's all they were, was just legs. He said he was going to bring those home if it was a pair of pants made out of deer skin. But anyway, that's what he decided. The way that they looked and the way they were made would just go over your legs. And that was what Indians wore when they were like walking through the woods and stuff, to keep like sticks and briars and that stuff from cutting their legs so bad. But anyway, he said it was just real interesting. He said there was pottery. I was trying to remember everything else that he said was in there. He said there was a lot of pottery, a lot of beads. Said there was one particular area in there that it was just like where they actually made the arrowheads. Said he guessed they brought rocks in from somewhere else, or they could have used the ones that was in the cave. But he said there was this one area where you could tell the arrowheads had been chipped and that type of stuff. He said he even found some arrows in there that had human hair attached to them. And I've always wondered if that was some that the Indians had actually scalped. But I'll tell you something else about hair in just a minute associated with arrows. That somebody told me several years later that they found the same thing. It was on a little creek bank on the land that their parents owned. So anyway, that's two lost Indian caves that were on a cliff very similar to this along the Tallapoosa River, about 2.5 or 3 miles from the Malone Bridge. Okay, now that was the story of the lost Indian caves on the cliff along the Tallapoosa River. One other thing I want to mention, I'll show you this picture one more time before we finish up this segment of the video. In this picture, if you will look into the river, you'll see two round metal objects. Those are the what's left of the pylons of the old river bridge that was there many years ago, and I believe in about the mid-1970s, that bridge was demolished, and the new bridge had been built several years before that. But the old bridge was made out of metal, and it had a wood floor in it, and it kind of give you the creeps to go across it. And a lot of times you would be asking the Great Spirit, or whatever you want to call it, to help you get across that bridge sometime, because I have been across it, and the old boards were loose. after over a period of time, they were kind of loose and made a lot of racket when you went across this bridge. But that's what you see in the river there. Those two metal objects laying in the water are what's left of the pylons from the original Malone Bridge. Okay, now I want to tell you a little something to back up what he said about the arrows with hair on them. What I'm going to tell you happened in late 1960s or early 1970s. As I've said before in some other videos, at that particular time, my family and I had horses, and we raised horses for a while. And there was a family that lived here just right outside city limits here in Wadley that owned a good bit of pasture land. And we rented a couple of pastures from them at one time and had horses in. And anyway, one day I was riding a horse over there, and I ran up on a creek out in the woods, out in their pasture. And as always back then, I would go looking for arrowheads or Indian tools or that type of stuff. And I found a few arrowheads on this little gravel bar over there that was in the creek. But anyway, whenever I rode on back up toward the house and toward the barn later that afternoon, the old people that owned the land were there. They were still living at the time. And after I got through unsaddling and getting the horse put up and everything, I walked up to the house and I showed them the arrowheads I'd found and asked them did they mind if I kept them and did they mind if I hunted arrowheads along the creek over there. And of course they said it would be fine. And the lady, I won't call her name right now, that her and her husband owned this place, she said when she was a young girl that they hunted arrowheads over there too. They were real interested in that type of stuff. And she said there was several times that she and her brothers and sisters or whoever went hunting with her over there, that they actually found arrows that had human hair on them. So that backed up each other's story. I had never heard that human hair was put on arrows in this part of the country. Well, I had never really heard it anywhere, but I guess it was. But by two people many, many years apart telling me the same identical story, that they had actually found arrows around here with human hair. And this lady said that the arrows they found would sometimes a shaft with leather around it holding the shaft onto the actual arrowhead was what they found. She said they never found any complete arrows over there. Of course, that was along a creek bank, and I guess over time the actual wood part of the arrow had rotted. She also said sometimes they had found them with what looked like what was left of feathers. And this too would have been around the turn of the century, because this lady and her husband was about the same age of the man that told me the story about the lost Indian caves around Malone. So that sort of backs up each other's story. Now let's get on to another lost Indian cave here in east central Alabama. I guess before we go on to the next lost cave story, I'll give the people around where I live a little clue of where these arrows were found with human hair on them. The location of the place where we rented the pastures, it was a very large old farmhouse. It was a big old white farmhouse, and it reminded me of some of the houses I had seen in the movie Gone with the Wind. And I'll give this clue. I called the place the Carlton Plantation, where we had the pastures rented and where I hunted arrowheads. And because of the way the old house looked, it was such a big old looking farmhouse that it looked like it was at one time a plantation to me. And I'll have to do another video about plantations and that type of stuff pretty soon, because I've got something interesting on that I need to tell you. But anyway, for the people around here who's listening to the video around where I live, the old Carlton Plantation, that'll give you an idea of where those arrows were found with human hair on them. Okay, now the next lost Indian cave, another little story. There's a place here in Randolph County. There's a lot of places called this, but we have a pretty famous one here in Randolph County that's called a Ball Rock. It's just north of Wadley on Highway 77, and the community is called Alman. Alman community is where this next Indian cave story comes from. It's not a very long story, but as you leave Malone and you come back toward Wadley on County Road 15, just right before you get to Alabama Highway 77, off to the left, there's somebody that owns a house there and owns a good bit of land, and they have found some caves there that they said that they have found arrowheads and that type of stuff in. But they also believe that Bigfoot is using these caves because the entrance looks like it has been wore down. That they have found some paths through the bushes and briars and that type of stuff into these caves. And they say when you go in them that there is a very bad odor in there a lot of times. And they believe that Bigfoot are actually using some of these caves up around Ball Rock. And also I have been told that some of the younger men here in the community have actually been up on Ball Rock, staked out looking for Bigfoot, and he's up there. I traveled over Ball Rock the other day, the first time in several years I had been up there, and there's a lot of signs. So you might want to check out these caves too up there. Speaking of Ball Rock, I'll show you this picture that I made. This is what Ball Rock, a lot of it looks like. It's just open granite rock, and as you turn off Highway 77, I'm not sure this county road number, the little dirt road, but right here used to be a Alabama state park. It was made a state park in sometime in the 1970s. I remember when it was. There was a big sign put up there that had the Ball Rock State Park. There was a lot of signs all down through there listing different type of rock formations, different type of trees and vegetation. There was one moss, they said, that grew on this particular rock that didn't grow anywhere else in the state of Alabama except right there on Ball Rock. But over the years, some of our fine representatives or senators or whatever you want to call them, people in Montgomery, let's just put it like that, decided that, or so I was told, decided that they would sell these state parks. And I wonder if they pocketed the money or if that money actually went back to the taxpayers that bought it. But we won't get on politics. We'll let Donald Trump do the politics for us right now. But anyway, I wanted to show you this. This is a picture from a little wooden bridge that goes across Ball Rock, where you can actually see a creek that runs across the road. And many years ago, and they may still do it now, but like I said, I haven't been up there in a long time, but many years ago on Sunday afternoon, a lot of us used to carry cars up there whenever this creek was running good, and it should be running good now with all the rain we've had. And we would carry our cars or trucks or whatever up there. The boys would carry the girlfriends and this kind of stuff. A lot of times we'd wind up cooking out up there on Ball Rock. Well, this is where we washed cars. Like on Sunday afternoon, it was just a big thing to do back then at this particular spot, and it was a lot of fun. But anyway, I'll have to do a video just on Ball Rock sometime if I can get access to some of the land now that's been that gates has been put up on to where you can't get into it. But right on down here now in this photo, the road used to not be exactly like it is right now here, where it's just in a curve, and you can see this gate. This used to be a four-way crossroad right here, and right through here, this crossroad that went straight on across. If you went down there I'm gonna say about 2 or 3 miles, the old place was called the Waterstone Place, the old Waterstone Place. And Waterstone wasn't a landmark or a formation of rock down there. It was actually a man's name that owned a good bit of land there. His name was Waterstone. And it was down on the old Waterstone Place that me and a friend of mine found a cave or a cavern down there one afternoon. And I have something to back that up. But I'm going to tell you what we did first. We used to do a lot of deer hunting, me and this friend of mine. And we were out riding around one afternoon, and something had come up about caves up on Ball Rock, but nobody actually knew where they were. They were lost caves that were supposed to be on Ball Rock. He and I were still in high school at the time, and for some reason, something had come up about in science class or something, Ball Rock. We had talked about it, and I think it was since they had made the park. So he and I decided we'd go up there and take a sledgehammer and break us off a piece of rock, Ball Rock, a piece of this granite, and so we could have it in class the next day. We were the teacher was talking about it. I don't forgot what all was being said, but we wanted a piece of granite down there to kind of have a show and tell, I guess, or whatever you want to call it. So that was how we came up on this cavern. We drove through the crossroads and proceeded on across Ball Rock down to the Waterstone Place, because there was a lot of rented out cropping down there. And we thought surely we could break us off a piece of it because there were some big stones out there. We just needed a little piece, maybe about as big as your hand. So anyway, we pulled over on the side of the road. It was just by coincidence that we stopped at the right place at the right time. We took a sledgehammer down there and we hit this rock. We wanted to break us off a piece. And when we did, it sounded hollow. So we got to hitting around on this rock at several locations. And you could tell part of that rock was hollow, and then you could tell whenever you hit solid rock, it didn't make the thud that it did whenever we were trying to break us off a piece. Anyway, what we believe is this was the Lost Indian Caves because many years ago my grandfather had told me, I gotta go get some water. Anyway, many years previous to us doing that afternoon, my grandfather had told me stories that he had heard over his lifetime about the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. And I know you have seen some of our videos on here and some of the stuff I have on the website about Horseshoe Bend. It's a very interesting place to me, and I've done a lot of research on it. But my grandfather told me that after the battle, and it is recorded that Manawa, who was the chief of the village at Horseshoe Bend, escaped from down there, that he made out like he was wounded and dead, and then after dark he slipped out of Horseshoe Bend and went on to do some other things in the Creek Indian Wars that was very beneficial for the Creeks. But anyway, what my grandfather told me was that when Manawa got away from Horseshoe Bend, that he and some other Indians made it to Ball Rock, and the Indians that lived up there hid him out until he got over his wound. I think he was wounded like 7 times. I believe he was shot or cut or wounded 7 different times that day in that battle, and it took him a long time to get over his wounds and heal up. But anyway, that's what my grandfather said, that he had always heard that the Indians that lived on and around Ball Rock hid him out up there for a long period of time until he was able to fight again. And this could have been one of those lost caves. My grandfather always said that if you didn't know how to find the caves and you didn't know the entrance, the Indians up there were the only ones that knew it, and you would never find it. But it could be just by coincidence or just dumb luck that me and my friend that afternoon hit the rock where it was hollow and there was a cave inside. But to back that up, a friend of mine who is an archaeologist from Auburn University that I talked to just a few weeks ago also mentioned that Manawa came to this area. And if you remember the video we did about Witchy, Alabama, the man that's the archaeologist told me the story on that. Witchy wasn't the original name up there of Witchy, Alabama. What it was, I'm trying to remember exactly what he called it. It was Wachia, I believe, was what he said the original name of this little community. And if you'll go back through the videos I've done, you'll see I did one on Witchy, Alabama. But he said Witchy was the way the whites got to pronouncing Wachia. They left off the last syllable, and it was Watchy for a while, Watchy, and then it was just more comfortable or easier for the whites to say Witchy. And that's how that place up there, Wachia, was Manawa's daughter. So that kind of ties in with what my grandfather said. Manawa was in this area at least, and I'm sure he was in this area if his daughter was here, and then more especially if a community was named after. And I think that other friend of mine who is an archaeologist from Auburn University, that he really needs to do some videos. I would really like to get him to do some videos about the Indian stuff here. He has written a book, and it's in the process of being published. His book is all about Indian history. He has searched out a lot. He is a modern day Indiana Jones. He may not like to be referred to as Indiana Jones, but he actually is, all the work and the research that he has done. And maybe we can get him sometime to sit down and tell us a little bit of stuff. But like I said, he has written a book on the history of Creek Indians here in Alabama and on into Georgia. And the book has been accepted by Auburn University to publish. and it was also accepted by Alabama to publish. So hopefully that book will be published soon. Now that was a Indian cave on Ball Rock, so now let's go on to another lost Indian cave. Okay, now this Indian cave is located near Roanoke, Alabama, on Highway 431. I had never heard of this Indian cave until I was working at a company in Roanoke. This has probably been 35, 40 years ago now. There was this young man that worked there. He was a pretty big outdoorsman. He liked hunting and fishing and hunting arrowheads and Indian history and that type of stuff. And it was one Friday afternoon, he and I were cleaning up. The place we worked at was a meat processing company over there. If you think of meat processing and associated with Roanoke, you'll probably know where I'm talking about that I worked. I won't call that name because they may not want me to. But anyway, we were over there cleaning up the kill floor and the cutting room and that type of stuff. And we got to talking about Indians and that type of stuff. And he asked me had I ever heard of a place just right up the road called Burton Rock. And I didn't quite know what he said there to begin with. And I asked him a time or two, what did he say? And he said, Burton Rock, like a person giving birth to a child. And I told him, no, I had never heard of that. And he said there was a place located just north of Roanoke where the Indians had a village up on the side of this cliff. And up there was this rock they had carved out for when women were fixing to give birth, that they could lay down in it and the baby could be born. That was something real amazing whenever we got up there to see it, how they had done this. Anyway, we had to work that Saturday morning, so we got off around noon Saturday, and he and I and another gentleman that I was a big Indian collector, we all took off up there. And I didn't know there was a waterfall in Randolph County, but there was probably a 30 or 40 foot waterfall coming off of this cliff. Very beautiful. Just take your breath, really, the way the water fell up through there over these rocks. It just cascaded down. It was just really something to see. Of course, now there's been a housing project put in there, and all of this has been done away with. This was, like I said, 35 or 40 years ago. But we walked, you had to walk through or under the waterfall, like you have probably seen in some movies. Like whenever you go into this, I was trying to think of the name of the movie that I saw one time, where you walked through the waterfall and you walked into a cave and then you came back into this enchanted place or whatever. That's kind of what this was up there. I don't guess it was enchanted or magical or anything like that, but it sure gave you a good feeling, or it did me up there that afternoon whenever we walked through this waterfall, and we came out on the other side, and there was this, it was like a mountain, and we climbed up the side of this mountain. You could tell some of the stones had actually been cut to help you, because it was a very steep mountain that we climbed. And we got on top of it up there, and there was this cave. And in the cave, you could tell that somebody at some time or another had lived there. I picked up a few rocks and walked on back into the cave and picked up an arrowhead or two. That's what he was telling, that this was where Indians lived, and he was telling all about what he had heard about they had carved this big stone for the women to lay down on whenever they began to give birth. So anyway, we walked back out of the cave and we walked around the edge of this cliff, which was a long, long way down. I'm going to say it was 40 or 50 feet that you would have fell straight down into a creek that ran on down the bottom of the mountain a little ways and then formed a waterfall out there. It went over the waterfall, or whatever you want to call it, however you say it. But anyway, whenever we walked on around there to this rock, if you didn't know that's what it was, you would have just walked right by it. But somebody had already showed this man what it was. I won't identify him right now, but he's a county law enforcement officer right now. I won't say what county, but if he sees the video, he'll know I'm talking about him, and that I remembered 40 years ago whenever he and I and this other friend of mine walked over there, and we all lay down on this Burton Rock. But what it was, the rock, the Indians had carved it some which way, to whenever you sat down on it, it was kind of like sitting in a chair. It had a little ledge or a little seat for you to sit down on, and then you leaned back on this rock. You didn't lean back flat, but you leaned back pretty close to flat. And the way they had carved it, it just fit the curve of your back and your shoulders. It just fit them perfect. And then they had carved on either side. It was between two large stones, and they had carved places in these two stones on either side to where you could put your heel or your foot in there to press whenever the Indian maiden began to give birth, or whatever the proper word for that is and everything. But anyway, we all lay down in it, and this other friend that went with us, he made some pictures of the rock up there, and he made some pictures of all of us as we lay in it, and of course we put our feet in the carved out heel holes or whatever you want to call it. And it was just amazing how much the Indians knew how to carve this stuff, because once you begin to put pressure with your legs, the small of your back or the curve of your back just pressed up against this rock to where you could really get pressure to go on and give birth. Of course, I've never given birth and hope I don't. But anyway, from the way you could press down with your legs, and then this rock caught the top of your pelvis bone or your hip, and it fit right into your back. It undoubtedly made childbirth a whole lot easier. I'll put it like that. But but there was a cave up there that had artifacts in it. But like I said, I picked up a couple of arrowheads and a couple of little rocks out of it, and everything else was left like it was. But unfortunately, it's all gone now, because somebody decided, since the world is so overpopulated, we needed to put some more houses up there for people to live, and that's what's happened to that. It's now gone, bulldozed or dynamited or whatever they did with the rocks up there and everything, which is a very bad thing that something like that was lost. But that was another lost Indian cave that was in this part of Alabama. And we'll go on now to the next Indian cave. Okay, and now for our final Indian cave. There may be some others around that I don't know of, but the final one I'm going to tell you about is as you come across the river bridge here in Wadley. Once again, you're going across the Tallapoosa River. Tallapoosa River was no doubt a very important river to the Indians in this part of Alabama, as it weaves and winds all through the state. I believe it starts in Tallapoosa, Georgia, and runs all the way to Montgomery, Alabama, where it runs into the Coosa, and I believe that forms the Alabama River. So it's a very long, winding river through East Alabama. But anyway, as you come into Wadley, you'll come across the river bridge, as you can see in this picture. And if you look back once again north, up through here, was at one time a large Indian village, was back up this way. And it is said somewhere along in there is a silver mine that the Indians knew about, and after the white people come in here trading and everything with them, they showed some of their closest friends where this silver mine was. But it's mentioned in some of the history books and some of the histories that's been written about Randolph County and that type of stuff. But it's supposed to be a large mine, but it's a hidden mine somewhere, and it's claimed to be lost. But it is supposed to have been a very well-producing silver mine somewhere along the banks of the Tallapoosa River around Wadley. So anyway, that's been our little Alabama adventure of lost Indian caves. In the future, I plan to do one on lost Indian graves and lost Indian mounds. We have several mounds around here, and some of those mounds unfortunately have been destroyed over the years, but we'll try to get that video pretty soon. It's a lot of interesting stuff there if you're into Indian history. Anyway, with all that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'd like to say hello to granddaughter Madison. Would like to tell you that the Alabama Bigfoot Society and all the things we do are come completely out of pocket. Comes out of our pocket. And let me see. Let me think what I'm thinking about. I hate to just go blank sometimes, but anyway, I mentioned a while ago about the Burton Rock that a friend of mine made photographs of us up there and made pictures of the rock. And before I did this video, I went over to his house a little while back and asked him about it, and he remembered going up there and everything. And but I asked him about the pictures. Did he still have copies of those? And he said, nah, he had no idea where those pictures were. That he remembered having them for a while, but he would look for them, and if he found them, he would let me know. But I didn't ever hear anything out of him, and I know how that is with the pictures. I lose about as many pictures as I manage to keep sometimes. But anyway, if you like this video, we hope you subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe. And then you can sit back and listen to some of the old tales and stories that I've heard over my lifetime. We do mostly about Bigfoot, and every once in a while, though, we get sidetracked on Indian history and UFOs and that type of stuff, or all type of paranormal stuff. Oh yes, and one other little thing I want to mention before we close the video out tonight. While I was doing the video, we had to stop it there for a minute and take a little pause. Someone called me on the phone and said in Alexander City this afternoon that it began snowing about 2 hours ago, and so we've got snow below us and we've got snow above us up at Cheehaw, and I guess we're right in the middle of it, and I guess we got it coming tonight, but it sure is cold here. I hope you'll be able to keep good and warm tonight. But anyway, with all that being said, I'll be looking for you next time on the next Alabama Adventure.